All right, guys, this is Tuesday. I want to go over what you guys are going to be doing today. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is look at utopian societies versus dystopian societies. So we've read a couple of stories already that deal with this whole idea of a dystopia, so we're just going to review some of these ideas that we discussed. All right, so first thing that we're going to look at is what is a utopian society, right? A utopian society is the perfect ideal society, okay? Everything is perfect or heavenly. Some examples that you might have seen in movies or in literature is like the Garden of Eden, Atlantis, and many stories of the Golden Age and Enlightenment. Now, what is dystopia? Okay, so a dystopia is the opposite of a utopia. Okay, so a dystopia is corrupt. The people are oppressed. That means that they're held down, and it's a miserable place. It often appears perfect when you first look at it, but in reality, it lacks justice and freedom. So, some examples from stories or novels: The Giver, The Hunger Games, Ender's Game, and Divergent. Now, there are 6 elements in every dystopia. Okay, so the first thing that you'll notice about dystopian stories is they have a uniformity or a sameness. So everything is kind of like the same. So every person in the society may look the same and lead a similar life. People have to conform to strict policies of uniformity. They have to do the same thing. Often you might see houses, clothes, lifestyles, beliefs, professions, which are jobs and relationships, all kept relatively uniform. So that's the first one. Second thing you'll notice is that there's no free will. So free will is the ability to do whatever it is that you want to do, or to have independent thought, which means like to be able to think on your own. Similarly, individuals aren't allowed to exercise their free will. Individuals are under constant surveillance. That means they're always being watched, and they're often punished for having their own independent thoughts and actions. Okay, the third thing that makes it a part of a dystopia is that the government is corrupt and there might actually be propaganda. So, propaganda is images or ideas that are posted for people to believe. So, a corrupt leader or a government demands to be worshipped and they have to be obeyed by the citizens, the people who make up the society. The government uses propaganda to brainwash the citizens to obey its leaders, to conform, which means to follow along in society, and fear the evil and dangers of the natural outside world, right? So there's this whole idea that there's things that are bad that they have to be afraid of. Another thing that you notice is that there's either segregation, which means to be broken apart into groups, or unequal power. So the majority of the population, the people, lived in a dehumanized state of squalor. So everyone, for the most part, the most people are like living very bad lives, while an elite few have knowledge and power. So there's some people who aren't living that terrible life. People are segregated. That means broken up into groups with different roles and unequal access to power, right? So no one has that same power. The next idea that's part of a dystopia is the fact that there's this perfect exterior, so it looks like it's good, but in the end, it's hiding this evil secret. So society seems to be well-intentioned utopia, so it looks like from the outside, oh, this is perfect, and then there's this evil truth that's revealed about it. Okay, and the last thing that you need to recognize is that generally these stories have unexpected heroes. Okay, so the protagonist, the person who's dealing with the problem, is always an unlikely leader of this revolution. They have lacking an obvious strength or experience or power or even value. Yet this hero discovers the evil truth beneath the reality and they decide to rebel against it. They usually struggle with their own conscience, which is what they consider to be right and wrong, and confidence in themselves before they're able to overthrow or escape this dystopian society. All right, so all of these ideas are important because what you guys are going to have to do is you are going to have to create a Pixton based off of these ideas here that are discussed for the short story that we read, right? So I'm going to open up Pixton. So remember, when you go to Pixton, it's same thing, pixton.com. You got to make sure you click on this Go Here for Classic Pixton. Open that up, okay? And then you're going to log in with your Google Classroom, okay? So it's going to ask you to log in. Make sure you put your Google Classroom login, okay? So what you're working on is this, the define elements of dystopia, okay? And you're going to hit open. Now this is my teacher view first. I had to change it to kid view so that when you open it, it's going to look like this, which is very similar. All right, so it's basically what I kind of went over just now, which is elements of a dystopia, right? So Three effective tools, including rewriting important concepts in your own words, creating mental images of these concepts, and relating concepts to real world examples. So you're basically going to make six separate images in relationship to these ideas for the story that we read, The Pedestrian, right? So remember, if you have to reread it or rewatch the video, you got to go ahead and do that. Now, these ideas that I just discussed, this whole idea of uniformity of sameness, no free will or independent thought, a corrupt government or propaganda, segregation or unequal power, the fact that there's a hidden evil secret, and the fact that there's an unexpected hero. These six ideas have to be used to create a slide for each thing and a storyboard, right? So let's take a look at it here. If you scroll down, this is basically what you're going to be looking at, right? So this is an example for the story. I believe this is for the Hunger Games, right? So they created it for the Hunger Games. So for the Hunger Games, they have each one of these things titled on the top here, right? So notice uniformity and sameness, no free will, independent thought, no free will, independent thought. So you're going to do the same exact thing for each one, right? So you're going to put all six of these. Underneath, you're going to basically write about how this thing, this idea, exists in the short story that you read, The Pedestrian. So you have to have an image with a background, discuss what your image, how does uniformity or sameness show up in the story of The Pedestrian, how does no free will or independence show up in The Pedestrian, how does corrupt government propaganda show up in The Pedestrian, how does an unexpected hero show up, how does this evil secret show up, and how does this idea of segregation or unequal power show up. Okay, so you should have at least probably like 3 or 4 sentences describing whatever your image is about. Okay, so again, this is going to be due on next Monday. So this is part of what you're going to be working on today, but it's not due until next Monday. So you can have a couple days to work on this. Um, I don't expect it to be done overall. So you should probably take like, I don't know, 10 or 15 minutes each day working on this to get it done. And again, you have to do it for The Pedestrian, the short story that we read last week. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to read a new story. It's called Among the Hidden. It's a novel. Okay, so open that up. Okay, look.